Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Oxygen Casino. I am Eric Cohen along with Shane Dale on what is an exciting week in Arizona sports.
Always.
You know, Shane, I was thinking about it. How many teams in the country have made the playoffs or have made the postseason in football, basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, and baseball? I have to think that is a very short list.
Yeah. I wish I would. It'd be tough to figure. I mean, I'm sure we can figure out. The question is how much effort do I want to put into it, but not too many. No. And I noted, Arizona left quite a legacy at the end of the Pac-12 as we know it, winning the men's basketball conference title. The baseball that was projected to finish 9th out of 11 finished first. Dramatic win over Oregon State on Sunday. And then the football team finished third, which maybe is the most surprising of all of them, at least compared to where we were at a couple of years ago. Some other victories in there as well. The softball team's success, the men's tennis team making a big run. So Arizona has left its mark on this conference. And one of the favorite stats of a lot of Arizona fans is Arizona did finish above 500 against ASU during Pac-10-12 play, 23-22-1, and won the last Territorial Cup Series trophy. I think they are ahead in that 9-6 overall since that they started keeping track of that. So a lot to be proud of, a lot to look forward to, and like you said, a lot to talk about.
Barring a dramatic rally, and we're recording this on Wednesday night as Arizona is playing Washington, but ASU lost their first game in the Pac-12 tournament. So while Arizona made the postseason in their 5 biggest college sports, ASU might go for 5. They did not make a postseason game. Play a postseason game in football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball yet, or softball. How about that, Shane?
Not that we were always comparing ourselves to the team.
I mean, yeah, it's your rival.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, that's what you do.
Certainly a point of pride, yeah.
So when your ASU friends tell you, whomever you are out there, and whoever those ASU friends are, when they tell you, oh, ASU is better than Arizona, and you can point to football, you can point to basketball, but you can point to the other sports as well, because let's be honest, there's a significant difference in the revenue producing sports in college. Arizona dominated them this year. Simple as that.
No doubt about it. And I think for ASU fans, just knowing them as we do, football hurts the most by far because they considered themselves a football school, whether they really are or not. I think if nothing else, they're a hockey school at this point. But to lose the Territorial Cup 2 years in a row and to watch Arizona rack up the accolades and lose their head coach and still look like they're in a much better position going forward than ASU. It changes from year to year. It can change almost overnight now, especially with NIL and the transfer portal. But Arizona is in a very good position going forward in multiple sports, not just compared to ASU, but compared to a lot of teams in the Big 12, which is coming up.
I'm going to give you something to think about here before we get into the main part of our program. So Jed Fish against Utah, you and I were at the game, and he ran up the score on Kyle Whittingham at the end, throwing a bomb to T-Mac for a touchdown.
From Jaden Delore, no less. Yeah.
From Jaden Delore, right. Now, why wouldn't he do that against ASU? If Jed thought, there was a remote possibility that he was not going to coach Arizona next year, run it up. They scored 70 on you the other year.
We talked about this, and I thought he kind of did. I mean, they were up 52-23 late in the fourth quarter, and he threw a pass in a goal-to-go situation. And I think,
but they could have scored 75 or more.
Possibly. Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you, but I mean, 59-23 in Tempe, the most lopsided win for Arizona on the road in this rivalry ever. I'm okay with that, and I'm good to move on.
All right. So last night, you and I had a chance to sit down with the professor, Matt Moreno. We're going to run over some recruiting things, and in football and basketball. But there was some football news today, and we will talk about that a little bit later in the show. But before we get into buy or sell, it is time for Shane's standouts.
Well, we got to start with the guy who we thought maybe was on the hot seat a couple months ago, and that's Chip Hale, the Pac-12 Baseball Coach of the Year, no-brainer, well-deserved, and only the second person in history to be named Conference Player of the Year and Conference Coach of the Year in the Pac-10/12. The only other was as a gymnast who competed at UCLA and coached at Oregon State. Okay. So not bad for a guy who we thought might be in a bit of trouble going into the season. So congratulations to Chip Hale. Incredible job this year. And then speaking of the baseball team, Cam Walty, who I've mentioned a bunch of times in this segment. Through 8 1/3 fantastic innings in Arizona's win over Oregon State on Sunday to win the Pac-12 title. The first 2 games of that series were ugly to say the least, but they took the third and won the Pac-12 in dramatic fashion. Cam Walty has been amazing all year. Excuse me, and he'll need to be continue to be in order for Arizona to make a deep postseason run. For softball, Dakota Kennedy was fantastic in Arizona's 3-game sweep in Fayetteville, beating Villanova twice and then Arkansas in between. She batted 500, including 3 home runs. By the way, my girlfriend before I met my wife went to Villanova. So my wife, who doesn't otherwise care about sports, is always happy to learn when Villanova gets his butt kicked. So she was very happy about that. So thanks to the softball team for getting me some points with the wife. Speaking of the softball team, it was, I don't know if you saw this, Eric, but it was really cool to see them cheering on Colton Smith in Stillwater today at the individual men's tennis championships. When I say today, I'm saying Wednesday. Colton won his match in straight sets to move on to the national quarterfinals, and he had a whole cheering section with the softball team. They sang "Bear Down Arizona" afterwards. Really, it was like kind of just a proud alumni moment, I think. Now, next up for him, speaking of the Territorial Cup stuff, in the quarterfinals, he meets Murphy Cassone. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, from ASU.
Oh, wow. How about that?
No Territorial Cup Series points on the line, but a big matchup for sure. So hopefully Colton's run will continue. And then that's what I got for this week. And I also just want to mention one more time, TJ McConnell, best of luck to him in the conference finals. I know that was a rough game 1 against the Celtics, but love what he's doing in Indiana. As a Suns fan, I wish the Suns would have traded for him before the season, but thrilled to see him continue to do well as one of the best undrafted players in recent memory in the NBA.
Yeah, and pretty cool to see Indiana's success without Ben Matherin. And
true.
Don't forget, Josh Green is also in the conference, semifinals. So pretty darn cool. And I think I'm missing another Arizona guy.
There are 4. Yeah, there are 4 of them, and I think they're actually Arizona's tied for the most alums in the conference finals in either side right now. Yeah,
pretty cool. All right, it's time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off. And after you do that, make sure to fill out the post-purchase survey.
Yes, please.
Mention Shane and I, and we will be very happy with you once you do that. All right, Shane, right now, we're kind of premature. We're talking during the first game of the Pac-12 tournament for Arizona, but it doesn't really matter what happens from here. After what we saw with the walk-off on Saturday night, Arizona baseball has already given us enough thrills in 2024. They could lose out, and it's already been way above what we expected.
I'll have to buy that. I mean, it would be disappointing if their season ended with a whimper like that, especially with the run they've been on. But yeah, I think they've exceeded expectations there. As of this recording, they're down 2-1 to Washington in the first game of the Pac-12 tournament in Scottsdale. Arizona starting their frankly their worst starting pitcher in this game. And the way this tournament is set up, the top 4 teams advance to the semifinal. You have three pools, the top 3 teams from each pool, and then the team with the best record among based on overall seeds. So essentially, Arizona can go 1-1 and get to the semifinals. If I'm reading that right, if I'm not, let me know. But I think that's what it is. So even they lose to Washington, they come back and beat Cal. They'll get through. I think that they would probably need to win this tournament at this point in order to host a regional, because I think losing 2 out of 3 to Oregon State didn't help, even though it was a fantastic way to end the season and Pac-12 play, regular season play. But yeah, certainly they've exceeded expectations. I think that the future looks very strong for the team. A lot of underclassmen, both hitting and pitching, that look great. They lost a lot of great hitting last year, and they're still doing well. So thrilled with what they've done. I don't think Arizona is a program that necessarily, I don't expect them to win conference titles, but I expect them to compete. I expect them to at least make regionals, and once every so often make a run to the College World Series. And I think Chip Hale's he's getting them there. It takes a while, but he's getting them there.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Shane, I don't want to come off with a loser mentality here in that if Arizona loses out, it's whatever. Listen, what they've done and what we expected from this team, which is basically nothing. And I was calling for Chip Hale's head at the start of the year. You got to give him an extension. I said it last week. You win one game against Oregon State, and they won it in dramatic fashion. They gave Arizona baseball a memory that is so significant. I mean, at this point, winning the regular season Pac-12 title is more significant than winning, 2 games on the first bracket of the NCAA tournament and then getting knocked out before you make it to the Sweet 16.
You'll
Yeah, if they
certainly,
get to the
yeah.
they get to the final 16, great. But you
Yeah.
know what? What they did, good enough. Sorry, loser mentality. I'm good. They've exceeded my expectations. Chip deserves a raise.
Yeah, and it was certainly memorable the way that
Oh,
the regular season ended. It was phenomenal doing it in front of the home crowd, and it was a great crowd too. Um, but yeah, I think, and we've talked about this before, Eric. Arizona baseball is kind of funny because if you look at the accolades, if you look at the national championships and the College World Series appearances, they are one of the most decorated programs in all of college baseball.
yeah.
But they're not revered that way.
No.
They're kind of, I feel like they've done what it kind of seems like the men's basketball team has done, like from a national perspective. The kind of recognition the men's basketball team has gotten, the baseball team is more or less accomplished. Is that if that makes sense? I feel like they're kind of switched in that way. The baseball team hasn't been as consistent as some other programs. Like the men's basketball team is always a very good team. The baseball team has had more ups and downs. They did with Andy Lopez, they did with Jay Johnson, and
Sure.
certainly now with Chip Hale. But they are one of the best programs in the country historically. And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect at least a regionals appearance every year. And Chip Hale seems to be on the right track for that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's gotten him to what's this, his third year, Shane, and he's already gotten him to the playoffs in 3 straight years. I mean, you can't really argue with that. Is that correct? Am I right about that?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they didn't belong in last year.
They
They made the
snuck in.
run.
Yeah.
Right. They kind of snuck in there. Regardless, I mean, I can't really say much outside of that. All right. How about softball? We had Ali Skaggs on the show last week. There was no Wildcat Country jinx.
No, she
And
hit a home run
similarly,
in Fayetteville. She hit a home
and
run.
took care of business. Yeah, I mean, that was
Yeah.
exciting. That game on Saturday was exciting, and the 2 games against Villanova were blowouts. So good for
Yep.
them. So, but ditto for softball, Shane. They've already overachieved enough. I mean, they got to the final 16. Losing to Oklahoma State this weekend in the Super Regionals is really nothing to be upset over by yourself.
I think it's kind of relative. Like going into the season, I think this would be probably the minimal expectation for me. I mean, maybe that's a bit unfair, but I think just looking at where this program is and where it belongs and the players they had coming back, I think that was a reasonable expectation going in. Going into regionals, whenever you're not hosting, more likely than not, you're going home after that first weekend.
Yeah.
I think 13 of the top 16 seeds ended up advancing to super regionals, and Arkansas wasn't one of them. And Villanova sort of helped them out. I mean, Arizona beat Arkansas the one time, but then Villanova knocked them out. Then Arizona made quick work of Villanova the next day. So from that perspective, yes. I think that I expect them to be competitive against Oklahoma State. Now Oklahoma State has one of the best pitchers in the country, and I blanking on her name right now, but she has the 3rd best ERA in the country among pitchers.
Wow.
So that's going to be tough to overcome. She might be the best pitcher Arizona's faced all season. And she shut down the competition in regionals last weekend. So that's going to be tough, but I expect Arizona to be competitive. At the very minimum, I don't expect them to be blown out. I expect them to play close games. If they lose both, that's fine. I don't expect them to move past Oklahoma State, but I expect them to be competitive because they, as Ali said last week, they play in the best conference, and that's a shame that the Pac-12 is going to be dissolved for softball purposes. The best conference in the country, or one of the best for so many years, and they're battle tested, and they'll be ready for it. And I expect them to put up a good fight.
Let us hope. I mean, listen, to do what they did last weekend, that's great. They got further than we expected. I mean, they weren't in the top 16 all year, Shane, and they are one of the 16 best teams. Oklahoma State is a very good team. And at this point, there's nothing to be ashamed of if they were to go out. Now, if they can pull the upset and get to Oklahoma City, Caitlin Lowe, you've gotten there. If you do it again this year, you've gotten there in two years already. I mean, probably give her an extension. Yeah. I hate to say that, but you get an extension. You get an extension. Just telling you what it is. When you win, that's it.
I will say it one more time because people are tired of hearing it, but the program that Caitlin Lowe took over was not the Arizona softball program of the 90s and the early 2000s. It's still very good, a top 25 program, but Mike Candrea's teams weren't national championship contenders on a regular basis for the last decade or so that he was there. He still won 8 national championships. He deserves a statue as big and as impressive as Lou Olson's at Arizona. But the program Caitlin Lowe took over wasn't that. And that's important to remember. And, she's in her third year now. And that's, I think the program is on the right track. And as long as that continues, I think that there's no reason not to stick with her.
Yeah, but here's the other thing, Shane. They haven't had the pitching over the
Yeah,
last, when's the last time they had a real horse,
true.
where the workhorse who could pitch every game, like Alicia Hollowell, Jenny Finch, Taryn Moat.
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona hasn't really over the last decade had one of those iron horses that's going to get the ball every game, good or bad. That's what I'm looking for.
And that means even more in softball, to your point, Eric,
Yeah.
because you can
Yeah.
pitch every day, or maybe not 2 complete games every day, but you can pitch in back-to-back days in softball. So having just one ace is massive, even more so than in baseball.
All right, let's talk a little football. How about this? We talked to Matt Moreno last night. We'll play that interview. Great stuff. But Arizona got a very big impact transfer. Just want to mention that Kedrick Reese-Cano from Ole Miss. He was a top 8 running back coming out in last year's class, a 4-star prospect, and he committed. And you have to give Brent Brennan's staff, including Alonzo Carter, the running back coach, a ton of credit. I mean, this is your probably leading rusher at this point, along with Quali Conley. Maybe Speedy Luke gets some, but this is a pretty suitable Jonah Coleman replacement, don't you think?
Oh yeah. Well, if you look at the recruiting rankings up from 2023, one of the best running backs in the class. I don't know if you saw, Eric, Rivals put its transfer portal grades for each Big 12 team out earlier on Wednesday, and Arizona got an A, and that doesn't count that doesn't count their latest commit. So when you throw that in, shoring up the running back room, because all of a sudden that was a position of concern. Bringing some of the guys they brought back were massive. In fact, I think it was a 68% of last year's productivity is coming back to this year's team.
Wow.
Now that's impressive for a team that kept its head coach, let alone one that has a brand new head coach. I think that puts them around 30th in the country out of all FBS teams. So about right around the cusp of the top quarter. Massive. It's incredibly impressive what they've done. So even without the transfers, but they added 3 impressive transfers over the weekend. Defensive end, cornerback who could possibly line up alongside Takario Davis, and a JUCO wide receiver, and now you got a running back. So they're plugging in all those gaps. It looks like as of now, they probably have a couple more to do. But yeah, my biggest concern going into the season is how is everyone going to mesh with the new coaching staff, new players. I think still that, practice is one thing, but in game is a whole other thing. But certainly this looks like a top 25 roster, if not better, going into the season. And I can't say enough good things about what Brent Brennan and his staff have been able to do it, primarily in retaining top players, and then also bringing in some very good transfers and getting some other transfers they didn't quite win out on, like Damian Martinez, interested in the program, which is a very good sign going forward.
Now, we're going to talk a lot more football as we go forward here this summer, but there were some rankings that came out. I mean, we've seen a lot of them that have come out over the last few months, but Utah is the consensus team to beat in the Big 12. Would you say, in your opinion right now, buy or sell, that Utah is clearly at the top on paper of all the teams that you have seen in the Big 12 to this point?
You want to hear what Matt Moreno says about this in the next segment, but because he's not quite as sold on Utah as some other people, but I would probably buy it. I've seen a lot of, because you've probably seen a lot of projections as far as the 12-team college football playoff, what it's going to look like. And, a lot of people, I've seen Utah plugged in there as the Big 12 champion. I've seen Oklahoma State. I think I've seen Kansas State. I've not seen Arizona. I'm okay with that. I tend to think that Utah is probably the team to beat, and that early game at Arizona at Utah we're gonna learn a lot about this team. And this is the fact that it's in Salt Lake is a big advantage for the Utes probably. Plus, Jedfish got him pissed off last year, and now he's gone, and now Arizona's got to deal with that. So I would tend to agree. I tend to think that the 2 top contenders as of right now are Utah and I don't know. Arizona's probably neck and neck with the next group, I would say, with Oklahoma State and Kansas State. I don't buy Kansas. Certainly don't buy Colorado or anyone else. But I would tend to agree. Just looking at Kyle Whittingham's track record, bringing back the star quarterback, I think that I I think that 9 or 10 wins and a 7-win conference season for Utah is more likely than not at this point.
All right. So here's the thing. Arizona's schedule, and once again, we're going to dive deep into this as the summer goes along. You start out with 2 fairly cupcake games, and then you have Kansas State on the road in a non-conference game, and the following week is at Utah. If Arizona can win one of those 2 games, we're on to something here.
Yeah.
If they can't, then, we have to reset expectations. But I would say take care of business in your first 2, and then it comes down to you got to win one of those 2. And then there's nothing on the schedule after that. There's a game at BYU a few weeks later. They have Texas Tech, who's an interesting team in game 5, and then at BYU. But on paper, Arizona's 2 toughest games are back-to-back in September.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bye week in between or something. There's a bye week in between. Regardless, you got to win one of those 2 games. And if you don't, you're 2-2, and we're pretty much talking Holiday Bowl, Alamo Bowl, or worse. We're not talking contending for the Big 12 at that point. Probably.
Yeah, well, and it's important to remember that the Kansas State game is a non-conference game because it was scheduled before the Big 12. The move to the Big 12 was announced, and that's going to be a Friday game, as we learned, the first Friday night game on Fox this year. But yeah, I think the one disadvantage of being in the Big 12 is that most of the at-large bids are going to go elsewhere. SEC, Big 10. So, the Big 12, I think at best you're probably looking at, as far as the college football playoff, you're looking at the conference champion, obviously, and then maybe one at large. So, 16 teams in that conference is going to be cluttered, and there's very little margin for error. I think it's a more winnable conference than the Pac-12, but you got more teams, and so you just don't have you lose one game, you're rolling the dice. You lose 2, you're probably out. So I agree with you. I don't know. I think if Jed Fish had come back with this roster, I think, college football playoff would be a reasonable expation, and this team could still get there, but that is not my expectation. My expectation is a top 25 program in Brent Brennan's first year, based on who he's brought back. I think, health permitting, I think that is a realistic expectation, fair or not. I think with this roster, I think it actually is kind of fair. As much as I don't like to put that much pressure on a new head coach, I think that, it's almost unfair to say, well, you did such a great job patting them on the back for bringing back guys. Okay, well, now you got to win with them. But that's the way it is. Yeah. And I think this is a top 25 team, but I think if I had to bet on it right now, I would probably lean Utah winning the conference.
All right, let's talk a little basketball here before we bring on Matt. So it was announced on Wednesday, and we had talked about this the other week, that UCLA and Arizona are finalizing a multi-year agreement. They're going to play at Footprint Center sometime later this year.
Yep.
In 2025, it'll be in Vegas, and in 2027, it will be probably at what was known as the Staples Center, or maybe the new Clippers Arena in LA, is what I would think. Not on the home courts. Okay, cool. So we want to keep the UCLA-Arizona rivalry together. That's great. But Shane, I hate to say this. I think Tommy Lloyd got a little too aggressive with his non-conference scheduling, and I'll tell you why. First of all, Arizona.
You're really going to double down on this?
I'm going to explain why.
Go ahead.
Arizona canceled its game with Purdue because they wouldn't have met the 18-game home minimum that is necessary. So you're scheduling all these hard games, and you're not scheduling the cupcakes at home, which I think are necessary just to kind of get your, you got to get the bench involved, and you want to learn what your team is like early in the year. But listen to this: in ESPN's 2 early rankings, Kansas is 1. Houston is 2, Baylor is 4, Iowa State is 5. That's 4 top 5 teams in Arizona's conference. They also, potentially in the Bahamas, would play Gonzaga, who's number 3, and they have a game scheduled in Birmingham. We'll see if that actually stays as is, against number 6 Alabama. So conceivably, on Arizona's schedule next year, they could, against these, and once again, these early rankings don't mean a lot, they could play every single team in the top 6, and they're ranked number 10. I'm telling you what, Shane, the Big 12 is tough enough as is. And I'm sure I'm going to have this question for you over and over and over, so get used to it. But just looking at the outset, I think Tommy Lloyd is scheduling too difficult in the non-conference, considering how much tougher his Big 12 schedule is. Your thoughts? Buy or sell with that statement?
All right, you're going to make me go through all this again. Okay, there is absolutely no downside, Eric, to playing these games. There is none. The experience you get, and I wish that Arizona had tougher games in conference play too. I wish it wasn't so backloaded, because I think that would have Clemson was probably the toughest team Arizona had played in a couple months. That's not an excuse for losing that game, but it's the truth because the Pac-12 just wasn't very good. There is no downside to playing these games. You're not going to get punished in net rankings if you lose some of them or even most of them. You're just not. And I think back, and here's a little sneak preview to our last segment here, because we're going to talk about our favorite memories from a certain season. You think back to a certain Russ Pennell coach team. The only reason they snuck in as the last team in the NCAA tournament is because they had a tough non-conference schedule and they won some big games. And they had a very impressive record against the then RPI top 50. That's why they got in and why other teams didn't, and why some national talking heads were losing their minds over it. It's like, well, the lesson here is play someone. I think you get battle tested. I think how many guests have we had on who have said the same thing? There's no downside.
But that was last year, and I get it. But we'll ask Matt about this in the next, or we talked to Matt about this. All right, but here's my take on it, though, Shane.
Okay.
Can Arizona fans handle losing double-digit games next year? Can they? It's going to be meltdown city.
Do you know how many games the '97 team lost? Does anyone care? Does anyone care? The 2001 team.
This is a different age of social media where Arizona fans are more sensitive than ever. They are going to overreact to every single, Tommy Lloyd should be fired. I'm just telling you what's going to happen.
You think the journey will be worth it? They finally get over the hump and get to the Final Four, though. Do you think anyone's
That's a big if. That's a big if.
I understand. You'd rather
just trust that's going to happen.
You'd rather just beat a bunch of cupcakes and feel good about it and just and just say, okay, well, that
in
was
the
nice.
Non-conference. Yeah, a few cupcakes that you have the tournament with, the Bahamas. I mean, I get it. UCLA is fine, but they also have to play at Wisconsin. I didn't include that. I mean, this is a brutal schedule. I would make it a bunch of cupcakes because your regular season schedule in the Big 12 is going to be murderer's row. Just my take on it.
I understand, and I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree because I would rather lose like when they lost to FAU and lost to Purdue. I mean, the FAU game especially was tough because it was a double OT, but it's like they lost the game to a good team. Purdue, they gave them a good run. They're going to toughen them up the rest of the season. So what? I was okay with that. And then maybe they lose a couple more. But you know what? That's how the Pac-10 used to be. The Pac-10 used to be a very tough conference. The Pac-10 is what used to be what the Big 12 is now. We're just getting back to that now. And how many times have we complained about a weak conference schedule and not getting to play anyone for a couple months? And now that's changed. I mean, and I think it's changed for the better, even though I'm going to miss the Pac-12 and it's a shame we don't have the regional conference anymore. From a competitive perspective, it's fantastic for men's basketball. And I think that having tough games throughout the season as opposed to just the beginning of the season and then kind of, coasting through a good chunk of the schedule. And I think Arizona got caught coasting a couple of times. I would rather have that murderer's row than feast on cupcakes for half the season. Just my take.
Let's see when this is announced, and we'll bring this up again. I just wanted to throw this on your radar with the news of Arizona UCLA, and we don't know how good UCLA is going to be. They can't be as bad as they were last year. All right, once again, Wildcat Country is very glad to be brought to you by Harrah's Auction Casino, and being that this is the last weekend of the month, you want to win a new car? Hey, Wildcat fans, this is the weekend to do it. It's time to play for your chance to drive one away. Harrah's Auction Casino is celebrating its 30th anniversary with the Win Your Wheels giveaway. This is your chance every month to win a new car. Just play your favorite slots at Harrah's Auction using your Caesars Reward card on the last Saturday of each month, which is this Saturday, to win your wheels. The more you play, the more entries you'll receive. Harrah's Auction Casino, play for all. Coming up next, Matt Moreno here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Welcome back to the Professor, Matt Moreno from Rivals.com and GoAZCats.com. Joining us, I think, for the 21st time, if my math is correct, the most frequent guest on the program. Always glad to have him on. And we're going to learn tonight, so get your pencils and pens ready, as I have right here. All right, Matt, first question. Arizona has been very active in the transfer portal and from the recruiting side under Brent Brennan. Just your overall thoughts of how the staff is recruiting, in terms of transfer and in terms of high school players that you know of thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of positive things going on for this stuff. I think there's been a really good reception from recruits and transfers too. I mean, they're getting a lot of people on campus, they're getting a lot of guys to visit. I think the next step is going to be landing some of these players, and that's kind of the next big hurdle for this staff. I don't blame fans. I've been talking to some different people and getting perspective, and I think there's a general feeling of kind of being underwhelmed in some ways by a lot of the fan base because a lot of the big names they haven't been able to close on yet. Damian Martinez was a big one that, Arizona was right there. It was going to be either Arizona or Miami. He ends up going with Miami. And there's been a couple guys like that where Arizona's been in the conversation and just hasn't been able to lock those guys up. There's obviously still quite a bit of time left before, things are really truly solidified because there's still, time before summer school and all that stuff. So with the transfer portal, obviously everyone focuses on those kind of 2 weeks in the spring, obviously the winter window as well. But the spring window, you kind of focus on those 2 weeks and you think that's kind of it, but that isn't it. That's just the time that those players have to go into the portal. So there's still a ton of players that are available. There's still time to take visits. The next dead period isn't until July. So there's going to be continued movement. And obviously you can bring in players all the way up until close to when school starts. So there's going to be a lot of rosters that continue to fill out, a lot more visits to be taken. Arizona has, a good amount of work still to be done in terms of adding to the roster. Maybe you see a high school player or two kind of late in the process jump into things, but it's going to mostly be focused on transfers and immediate help. There's a pretty solid foundation in terms of the roster and what they have in place. So that's a good place to start, but there's still a couple pieces here and there that they really, I think, do need to kind of address and solidify before they can feel, fully comfortable. But, the next step is going to be kind of really closing on some of these top tier targets because they've been in play with a lot. And Arizona's kind of it's been interesting because you look at some of these players that they're in play with and Arizona's kind of it feels like a strange school if you're looking from the outside. If you're not an Arizona fan, if you don't follow the team, it feels like it's a strange school on this list of offers of all these, big time programs. And so, I think that is one of the positives. And I think we talked about this maybe even last time I was on here with you guys was the NIL seems to be there. And so that's a big part of this whole equation. And so, unfortunately, I think for a lot of fans, it is just a reality of the game. And a lot of times it becomes more transactional than it is, any decisions made with the heart or the brain or anything else. It's really more of, hey, what's the number? This is my number that I want to get to. Let's, make a deal, essentially. And that's not a fun way for, I think, a lot of fans to view how this whole process plays out. But, for a lot of transfer portal players, it really is just about, how much money can I make? And that's what I'm looking for. And the collectives are involved and this whole process kind of gets played out and that's how it goes. So it's not as fun, I think, for some fans as they track it all. But I think if you're an Arizona fan, I think you should feel pretty good about the conversations that they're at least in right now, because it means that they do have, some NIL money to play with and some NIL money to bring a team together. And, the other piece of that is just kind of closing on these players. And I think that's the next big hurdle for this staff.
Well, and Matt, Arizona did close on several transfers over the weekend. Cornerback transfer from Miami, JUCO wide receiver, a defensive end. Any recent commits that you think might have a chance to make an impact on Arizona just as soon as next season?
I think Demetrius Freeney from Miami is a really interesting one. If you look at kind of the recent crop of commits here, they all kind of have Bay Area ties, and so Lance Kennelly came from Stanford. Obviously, San Jose State's not too far. You get a College of San Mateo transfer. Demetrius Freeney played at College of San Mateo. So there's been that real connection to the College of San Mateo for this staff, a nearby school in the Bay Area. So they obviously know it well. And I think I'd like to see them kind of expand beyond that because that well is going to run dry at some point. But it is a very talented roster. And if you look at in terms of JUCOs nationally, they're a pretty prominent program and have a ton of talent. So it's not a bad thing to focus on that. But Demetrius Freeney is a really interesting one because had a good season at the College of San Mateo and then ended up going to Miami. Had a ton of programs really interested in him last year when he went, when he was a junior college transfer and had a lot of programs looking at him. Deion Sanders, Colorado. Some of these other programs, high level programs really wanted him, and he eventually, picked Miami. Thought he was going to play for Jamal Adai. Did have a chance to, at least get coached by him a little bit, a former Arizona assistant, but now Jamal Adai has moved on to the NFL and kind of shaking things up there at Miami. Kind of gives a chance for someone like Demetrius Freeney to get a restart. But you have to understand that, these coaches have those ties to College of San Mateo, and so they have a feel for what they want to do. And like I've talked about before, I think on the show, I really do trust their evaluation skills. And so you look at the numbers that he put up last year, played in like 3 games, really didn't do a whole lot. But you look at the skill set, you look at the talent, you look at what he's done before, you look at the other programs that were involved last year when he was being looked at the next level. And there's a lot to, I think, work with. And so it's going to be about them kind of unlocking that potential at this level. He's proven he can do it at the junior college level. So obviously Arizona, now that you kind of see the makeup of the roster, you look at who they didn't lose. Obviously, Takario Davis coming back and being part of this team is a big deal. But you need someone to go opposite of him. And so Demetrius Freeney as a cornerback, a bigger cornerback like they like, I think has a potential to step into that role because it really didn't get solidified during the spring. It wasn't like they came out of the spring going, okay, these are 2 guys. It's Takario, and then it's like maybe some other guys. And so there's still some battles to be had at that position. And I think that's where you look at someone like Demetrius Freeney, as that potential second corner for this team. At the very least, he's going to provide some depth. And, I think the pieces are there for him to really be able to contribute right away. I think maybe we talked about him last time, but Ramelo Murphy, I think, is somebody. He's a little bit further back in terms of equipment. He a little bit ago now, but I really like what he brings to the table. A big play, big playability, a chance to stretch the field and just kind of take some relief or give some relief to someone like T-Mac, who is going to have a ton of attention on him this year from opposing defenses. There's going to be defensive coordinators trying to just key in on him and stop him. And so you just need somebody to take some of that pressure off. And Ramelo Murphy, somebody that I like, and I think can stretch the field and do some different things to alleviate some of that pressure.
What do you know about T-Mac's injury?
It's been kind of quiet. I think it sounds like it's going to be okay. I think there's obviously that feel of like, oh no, as it happens right away, and obviously it's going to take some time, but it's never good. You never want to see your star injured in any way. We'll see how it all impacts the team and how things go, but so far it doesn't sound like pure panic. I think you would have seen them be very, very active in terms of pursuing other receivers. If that was the case, that's usually the telltale sign. A lot of those things are going to be kept under wraps for obvious reasons. And, for him, it's you don't want to, let NFL teams know about injuries and anything like that. There is a focus on, life after Arizona for someone like T-Mac. And so, it's going to be quiet on that front for a lot of it. And then obviously you don't want to get, have teams preparing. Well, now you don't have to worry about T-Mac. So we'll see kind of how it all lines up. But I think the fact that they weren't, heavily going after a ton of receivers or haven't been up to this point, I think is a positive sign for what's to come for T-Mac. And obviously you just want to get him healthy and go from there. But we'll kind of see how it all plays out in the summer months. And then obviously once you get back for training camp.
I know this is an Arizona podcast, but I have to ask you, since you cover recruiting on the West Coast, your thoughts on what Jedd Fisch has done at Washington, because to this observer, it seems underwhelming.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's been an adjustment is probably what I would say. I think, I think a lot of coaches, and not to say this is the case for Jedd and what they're doing up there, I think they have a lot of confidence in what they're doing and their ability. But I think a lot of coaches, once they start to establish themselves and feel like they have kind of a name, they rely a little bit too much on that. And Arizona's gone through that at times. And Rich Rodriguez was kind of a culprit of that, especially early on when he took the Arizona job. He kind of assumed, well, I'm Rich Rodriguez. Everyone's going to come here because I'm Rich Rodriguez and what I've done before. And that just wasn't the case. They really had to attack it. And it was really difficult, kind of tough sledding to, pull together talented recruiting classes. And so I think some coaches tend to fall into that a little bit. The really interesting thing has been, I've been out on the road, covering a lot of college, high school showcases, featuring a lot of college coaches, because right now, May is kind of the time when these coaches can be on the road and evaluate recruits. And yes, the evaluation part is part of it, but a lot of it is, I just want to be seen. I want these recruits that I'm, making a high priority to see that I'm here, to see that I'm recruiting them, to see that I'm visible, and that we are in it for them. And Washington has been pretty clearly absent, especially in Southern California, where you would expect that they'd be pretty heavily involved. And in past years, getting out to California and seeing some of these bigger schools, Mater Dei, St. John Bosco, who have, a ton of talent, a lot of guys who are going to be playing on Sundays. You would expect, a lot of programs to just be at those schools and be at those showcases. And in past years, Arizona's been well represented under the Jedd Fisch staff. And I don't think I saw any Washington coaches in the last couple of weeks out at any of these showcases. And so that's an interesting kind of move and decision there. I mean, it's a little bit different. It was a little bit kind of surprising to not see more or see any Washington coaches at the showcases I was at. I went to both the Mater Dei and the St. John Bosco showcase. At Mater Dei's showcase, Oregon had 7 coaches there. I mean, that's kind of what that's if you're Washington, that's who you're competing with right now. You're trying to get on that level. You're both going to the Big Ten. That's the type of kind of show of force, I guess, is what you want to be. You want to be able to go to a prominent school like that and be like, look, half of our staff is here. We want your players. And so it's been really interesting. Arizona was represented throughout the week at both. Dwayne Keenan was very active at a lot of these college showcases. Brett Arcee, especially in Southern California, is kind of his area. But Arizona was well represented. Alonzo Carter was around at a lot of these events. And so you see Arizona staff, current staff out there and working and being busy, but Washington, and I talked to a couple people and Washington came up a couple times where it's like, they've been here before. Like, Kevin Cummings was like around at these events. John Richardson was around at these events and they just haven't been around. And so it's been really interesting to see. It's a different strategy, but I think if you're a Washington fan, I don't know that you're panicked yet, but I think there is going to be, time for them to really kind of build this class. And they do have some really talented players and recruits visiting throughout the month of June. So I think things will ramp up for them, but I think I don't want to say that it is just, hey, I'm Jedd Fisch, come play for me. And that's the process, but there definitely feels like there's elements of that where it's kind of relying on, hey, this is what I've done before and not being as proactive as maybe they should be, because they do have to kind of prove some things. And if you talk to recruits, I think the recruits are a little bit hesitant about like, well, yeah, Washington played for a national championship, but that whole staff is gone.
Right.
And yeah, you kind of want to, I think they feel like, hey, prove it to me. What are you guys about? I think there is a lot of positivity. I think there's been a lot of recruits who have kind of carried over their interest from that they had in Arizona. It's been unfortunate for Arizona where there's a lot of high level recruits that were looking at Arizona. They're probably going to end up at Arizona until the staff moved. And now a lot of those guys are looking at Washington, but now there's no guarantee that they're going to go to Washington. So it's going to be some other program that kind of benefits from this whole thing and how it all went down. But yeah, it's been really interesting to kind of track Washington and see their movement or kind of lack of movement lately.
Maybe just too busy keeping an eye on the Billy Napier situation in Florida. I just, all right. Switching to basketball, Matt. I feel like this is more of an Eric Cohen question, but I'll ask it anyway. Your best guess as to who's going to play for Arizona next season? Caleb Love, Josan Sanan, or both?
The more this lingers on, the more it feels like it's one or the other.
Yeah.
And that's just a feeling. I know Josan Sanan has been pretty clear, like, hey, I'm not fully reclassified yet. I'm still kind of feels like he's been pretty open about like there's still some gray area there for me. I know we at Rivals basically re-ranked him. I know a lot of other outlets re-ranked him and basically were like it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to end up moving to the 2024 class. And that just I think he's kind of pumped the brakes on that a little bit for obvious reasons, because he wants to be able to play. He wants to be able to have, a role on this team. And the more this plays out, the more it feels like, Caleb Love is going to be back at Arizona. That's just what it feels like right now. I feel like if it was the alternate side of that, we'd hear a lot more buzz about him in terms of NBA stuff and stock riser and all those types of things. And there just hasn't been that. And behind the scenes, it's felt a lot more like, hey, at least it feels like the team is gearing up to welcome Caleb Love back. And so that's kind of where it feels like right now. Obviously, like many things within, college athletics and athletics in general, it can flip very quickly. And one team can come around and be like, hey, we're really interested. We might take you in the first round. And sometimes that's all people need to hear. And they're like, I'm sold. I will stay in the draft. But as we kind of get closer to kind of time to make a decision, it's coming up very, very quickly. I'm going to say that it'll be Caleb Love. I think Josan Sanan will end up staying in the 2025 class. And then we'll see what happens there. Because if he goes back in the 2025 class, then you maybe have to start the whole process over again. I don't know that I would put my money on, if this scenario plays out and Caleb Love comes back, I wouldn't put my money necessarily right now on Josan Sanan playing for Arizona if he has to stay in the 2025 class. I think it's very likely that he ends up kind of opening things back up and then figuring out what his options are from there. Maybe Arizona comes back in the picture, when the time comes again, but I would bet that is probably the more likely scenario right now, the way I see it and the way I kind of feel how it's going to play out and have kind of sensed. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. But a lot depends on what Caleb Love decides. And, he kind of holds all the cards in this scenario. But it feels like, I think, based on kind of how things have played out so far, I would bet on Caleb Love being back and Josan Sanan staying in the 2025 class and Arizona trying to figure out, okay, are we going to be able to keep him?
Yeah, all right, two more for you, Matt. And then this one's kind of piggybacking off the the last question. How big of a deal is NIL when it comes to this situation? Like Caleb's got to be thinking, okay, can I make more next year coming back to Arizona versus being a potential second round pick or going to the G League? Does that become a major factor for guys who are maybe potential second round picks, maybe on the first or second round cusp?
I think so. I think you hear, I mean, you don't hear it kind of plainly put like that, but I think you have to, it's kind of hinted at. And I think if you kind of just observe and see how things play out, I think there's been a lot of decisions like that where players are going, wow, I can, be the big man on campus. I can have kind of all the attention on me. I can still do, a lot of things I want to do. Kind of a byproduct of the whole NIL thing is that like, welcoming in a player like that, they kind of have a lot of freedom, and they're going to have a lot of freedom at a place like Arizona as it is, just because that's how Tommy Lloyd is and that's how he operates. But I think a lot of players go, well, I can, play in the G League and really have to battle and not have a glamorous life, or I can come back and make a good amount of money and be a premier player in college basketball. I think that's really appealing for a lot of players. I feel like they don't see it as it was viewed previously, which is like, this is a kind of a gate between me and what I want to accomplish. I think they still see it as, hey, this is still an opportunity to shine, and it's not going to impact my NBA career, my pro potential really in any way negatively. And so I think there's a lot fewer players who are concerned about the injury aspect of it. And that was always kind of the big deal before. It was like, hey, if you have an opportunity and you're going to have a chance to potentially play in the NBA, you don't want to risk injury and come back and get hurt, and then your whole career is done. And so I think having that little bit of a guarantee of like, hey, at least I'm going to have some money, I think has really changed things for a lot of players. And I don't think you can ignore that. I think you have to really pay attention to that. And I think, someone like Caleb Love probably doesn't come back unless there is that element of kind of having that assurance and having that insurance of, having some money and being able to be like, hey, I can make a pretty, solid chunk of change here and still be in school and still be a premier player on a premier team and still eventually, get to where I want to get. Maybe, what's the difference between coming back to Arizona for 1 year and playing in the G League where not a lot of people are seeing you if the money's not that much different. And so I think that's where a lot of guys are right now. I think they're weighing those things. And yeah, I think you can't ignore that that's a big part of this whole process for a lot of these players.
Not to mention being the big man on campus for another year. I'm sure that there's some appeal there as well. Last question for you, Matt. Thanks as always for your time. I want to ask you about Trey Townsend and Anthony Delorso. How do you see them fitting in on next season's team, and what kind of role do you expect them to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring players like that to have a role, and to be able to be a big part of this team. I really think that Trey Townsend is really impressive. I think he fits into kind of what, maybe not exactly, but kind of that Keyshawn Johnson type of role, and have an opportunity to kind of do some things at that power forward position. And I really like what he brings to the table. I mean, you look at what he did at Oakland and what he's done and why, so many teams were after him and why he was so coveted, and he really fits. And I think both those players I think are going to have an opportunity to play. It's going to be a very, very deep roster. And even it didn't necessarily look that way at one point. I know we were talking about like, what's it going to look like? And I think you guys had asked like, well, who's going to be starting? Who's going to be the leading scorer? And like quickly or shortly after, I was like, I think I have to revise my answers on that, because they had started adding some players. And I think I really like how this team is coming together. It's not maybe as glamorous as I think people would hope it to be. And, you're not talking about, the Sean Miller kind of high level recruiting era where it was like every 5-star and every guy, like you have Aaron Gordon on the team, but maybe there isn't that like clear cut, like, oh, he's going to be a top 10 pick, lottery pick type of player, but there's a lot of talent on the team still, a lot of talent coming in. And so I think both of those guys, I think, are going to be key pieces of this team. And it's going to be, it feels like it's going to be a very deep team. And I think they both have a great shot to be really big parts of this team, be starters. And it'll be interesting to see. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting practices. I think is what it's all shaping up for, is that, once they get into, the preseason and kind of getting ready and ramping things up in the fall, once they start having official practices, I think you're going to see some very competitive practices, a very competitive environment, because as we all know, eventually coaches kind of narrow it down to like, hey, we're playing 7 or 8 guys. And so that'll be kind of the next task for Tommy Lloyd, is figuring out exactly kind of how that all comes together and what he wants to do. But that's every coach's dream, I think, is to have, hey, we have too much talent. We have so many guys, we have to figure out how to play, on the floor. And so I think the coaching staff is going to love it, but the players, I think, are going to have to kind of figure that out themselves, and we'll see. And I think players who don't get as many minutes as they like, or aren't, playing as much as they want to, I think will understand like, hey, like this is a really competitive environment. Like the guy next to me could eventually play, in the NBA. And there's a lot of those guys and a lot of those players. And someone like KJ Lewis coming back, like, hey, how do you fit in this team? Because he could have, it feels like he is maybe he is the best pro prospect on, last year's team, and decided, hey, I'm coming back. And, his expectation is going to be like, hey, I'm starting. I already know this system. I already know kind of how this all works. And so, I want to be out on the floor. And so it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how all the pieces come together. But I do think it's going to be really competitive, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch, especially in the early part of the season. I know it's still a long way away, from the fall, but I think in the early part of the season, I think it's going to be really competitive, not only with just the players and kind of getting ready for their opponents and all that stuff, but just among the team trying to figure out, okay, I want to be able to play once, Pac-12. I'm forgetting Big 12. Big 12 play comes around. Once conference play comes around, I want to be on the floor. And so I think there's going to be a lot of competitive practices and a competitive environment at Arizona.
All right. Every time we have you on the show, as the last question, I ask you for some kind of a prediction. So here you go. Arizona will finish higher in the Big 12 in football or men's basketball?
It's a good one, Eric.
Football. And I think we've talked about this.
Whoa.
I think we've talked about this before.
We have, yeah.
But Arizona fans are going to have to get ready for some losses in basketball. It's just going to happen. I mean, it's a very competitive league. They're going to have to get used to not running through the league like they did in the Pac-12. It's just a different caliber of talent. There's a ton of good teams. There's some great teams, within the Big 12. And so it's just not going to be as easy. I think it's going to be better for Arizona in the long run. I think it's going to prepare them much better to get into the NCAA tournament and, put up some of those fights that they have been in before. And I think they're going to be very, very battle tested by the time, March rolls around. I think it's going to be better for Arizona. But Arizona fans don't like to see Arizona lose games. And so it'll be part of what happens. I think it's just going to be part of the growing pains. I think you could have a very, very good team. And still you're going to lose some games because there's a lot of tough environments to play in. And so I don't think I think football team is going to finish higher, but I don't think it's necessarily indicative of how good or bad the basketball team is going to be. I think they're going to be a very, very good team. And if they do end up, running through the Big 12, I think it says a lot about, what type of team they have and what they're able to do, because that's going to be very difficult to do, I think, for any team in that league. But right now I would say football. Again, I still think I have a lot of faith in what they're doing on the football side. I think there are some pieces that kind of need to get addressed and get figured out, but you still have your key cogs of this whole thing. And you cannot say enough about having a quarterback who returns. So many teams across the country do not have that. Even prominent teams don't have a quarterback who they can say, yeah, he was our quarterback last season.
They have 68% of their roster returning next year, which is crazy for the new head coach. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think it's, you can talk about other players on the team. You can talk about someone like T-Mac. You can talk about some of the defensive guys, but Sicario Davis, but to have your quarterback back and to have him returning, I know it's a new system. I know they're going to be doing some different things, but that's huge. That's really huge. And not every team can say that. And I think that holds a lot of weight. And quite frankly, I think Arizona staff knows that they need to win because they need to hit another level recruiting wise. And I think that happens much quicker and they're able to have a more smooth transition if they win games. If Arizona comes out and is able to maybe not necessarily replicate what they did last year, because I think that was very difficult on its own and took some things falling into place. But if they're able to have a really strong season, it's only going to help this program and it's only going to help prove what this staff can do to recruits, to other transfer players, and then you just keep it rolling. The biggest thing that the football team cannot have happen is have a down year. They need to have a positive year because I think there are, a lot of recruits and a lot of players who like this staff, but are like, hey, let's see how it goes and let's see how it plays out. As I'm sure a lot of Arizona fans are kind of in that same position as well. And, I know there will be the criticisms if they do well, it's gonna be like, well, you won with somebody else's team. Who cares? Like, you're going to eventually build your own team after that. And I think winning this year and winning, 9 and 10 games, if that's possible, which I think it is, I think they have enough talent to do that. That's going to set you up so well for the program you want to be in the years to come. I mean, even after one season, you kind of saw where Arizona was really bad for a while, and they have a really strong season. And then all of a sudden the tune changes. Players and recruits are like, that's the destination. I want to go play with those guys. I want to be a part of that. So if you're able to kind of keep that momentum going, I think it'll do a lot for Arizona. And I do think they have a really good chance to do that because I like kind of the core of this team and what they have. And, and I'm not huge on Big 12 football. I think there's a lot of moving pieces. I think a lot of the teams aren't a lot of teams coming in aren't as great as they were. Utah's not what it was. I know they're gonna have their quarterback back and all that, but I'm not necessarily sold, obviously, on it being as much as much talent on the football side as there is in the basketball side, where you go down that list and it's like, man, all those teams are going to be playing in March, and there's just so much talent in that league. And so, again, I don't think the end product is going to be a clear kind of an indication of what is what, but I would say right now, to answer your question in a long-winded answer, the football side is what I would pick right now.
I hope you listening out there learned as much as Shane and I did from Matt. You know, I jokingly call him the professor every time he comes on, but you telling me that wasn't like you didn't get more out of that interview than you got out of some classes that you took in college? I think we all can agree, Matt. Always great to talk to you. Check him out, rivals.com.
Thanks, guys.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Great to catch up with the Professor Matt Moreno for to just fill us in on all the fun stuff that's going on. It's too bad we couldn't talk to him about the new running back commit. Boy, I'm excited about that, and I'm very pleased with what Brent Brennan and staff are doing. It's gonna be a fun team. I mean, if football season can't come soon enough, it's about to get really hot here in Arizona. We got 3 months of dealing with that, but hey, we're gonna have a lot of football people on this summer. Oh, yeah. Hopefully to talk about Arizona football, so it'll get us excited. And its camp starts in early August, and that's so basically we got 2 months, and maybe Arizona baseball can give us a little bit of a run, or softball can keep this going a little bit longer and give us a little bit of a run. So, all right, before we get to our favorite memory from a certain year, Shane, tell us about Autograph.
You can now find Wildcat Country on Autograph, Eric, glad you asked, which was founded by Tom Brady, a professional football player of note. And the whole idea of Autograph is to reward college sports fans simply for being fans. You can download the Autograph app and subscribe to the Arizona channel using referral code Wildcat Country, one word, all lowercase, and you'll find pretty much all the Arizona related media content you already consume in one place. And if you hear fireworks in the background, by the way, that's the high school graduation going on right next door. So you can find pretty much all the Arizona related media content you already consume all in one place, including the Wildcat Country podcast. The fireworks I wish for us, but they're not. And for every story you read, every podcast episode you download, you'll accrue points that you can use to buy some very cool stuff. So definitely check us out on Autograph, subscribe to the Arizona channel, and you'll help us out a lot. And we'll set off some fireworks for you. And we think you're going to really like the app and get all your Arizona Wildcats news, including us, all in one spot.
All right. So we started last week our favorite memories from a certain year.
Yep.
And we're going to do the 2008-2009 year. And I have a feeling what your memory is going to be, and you might have a feeling what mine's going to be. Go ahead. I'll let you start with this one.
2008 was my favorite ever Territorial Cup game. It was a time, I wasn't really passionate about the rivalry probably until after I got us. Well, that's not necessarily true, but I was probably even more passionate about it and followed it more. And of course, ended up writing a couple books about it after that. And then 2008 was really Arizona finally getting back over the hump in the post Dick Tomey era. They had come close a couple times, come close to getting to a bowl game. They came a game against ASU short because they had lost the past couple of years. They'd lost 3 in a row, actually. Finally, in 2008, Las Vegas Bowl on the line. Essentially, the Las Vegas Bowl is going to invite the winner of that game to the Las Vegas Bowl. And halftime, Arizona was down 10-7, kind of a fluky score for ASU. But ASU was not good that year. Their offensive line was in shambles, and Arizona poured it on the second half. Rob Gronkowski scored the only touchdown in the first half. Arizona went up for good on a touchdown pass. And I'm doing this all by memory. From Willie Tuitama to Delashawn Dean, blast from the past there. Ruby Carpenter threw an interception. Nick Grigsby scored. And my favorite play of the game, and maybe my favorite play from all the Territorial Cup history, ASU goes 3 and out on this next possession. Mike Thomas returns the punt for a touchdown. A couple of huge blocks on the punt return. Orlando Vargas and Jaron Kreiner, freshman Jaron Kreiner, who was playing special teams at the time, put the game away early. I think it was late third quarter, early fourth quarter. And it was just like the floodgates opened, and it was like a decade of frustration kind of unleashed in that game, and really, and almost on that play specifically. I remember the band kept playing the chorus to Viva Las Vegas in the fourth quarter as the game wound down. So that's my favorite game. Arizona finally became relevant again under Mike Stoops, and it was a fun second half.
Yeah, I remember it, December 6th, 2008. Why do I remember that? One of my good friends' birthdays is on December 6th, and I did not take her to the game, even though she lived right around the block from the stadium. She is still upset to this day that 16 years later that I did not take her on her, I think it was 20-something birthday to that game. Regardless, I remember it was 10-7 at halftime, and I was freaking out because this was Arizona's one chance to make a bowl game.
Yeah.
I had never, as an Arizona student and really fan of my semi-adult life, I had never seen a bowl game.
Yeah.
Because after the Holiday Bowl in '98, Arizona didn't get there, as you said, for 10 years.
Yep.
And I started going to school in 2001, so I was there. Makovic and I got there at the same time, and I didn't see anything good until then. So you're right. I remember feeling so overjoyed in the second half. Rudy Carpenter gets knocked out of that game, and it was just super exciting. My favorite memory was actually 2 weeks later in the Las Vegas Bowl against BYU.
Sure.
Now, this is going to sound bad, but roll with it here. I haven't been in very much cold weather in my life. Very, very small amount. That Las Vegas Bowl game where there was snow on the ground in the end zones was like shoveled up in a pile. Was the coldest I have ever been. I think it was 25 degrees. I was wearing layers. I don't own layers. I mean, I was wearing multiple sweatshirts and then a jacket on. I mean, it was freezing.
Well, for Las Vegas too, that's unusual because Las Vegas's temps are similar to what we get out here.
Well, they had gotten snow that week. Yeah. And, I just remember I was in the second row of the end zone, which is where I got the tickets for being a season ticket holder.
Oh, nice.
And at Sam Boyd Stadium, remember walking around the perimeter of the stadium and looking for BYU fans that were drinking. Predictably, I didn't see any. But I mean, I think
you were going to shame them if you found them. Is that right?
Well, no, I just was hoping to see that. But this was Rob Gronkowski's last game in an Arizona uniform. Mm-hmm. This was Willie Tuitama's last game in an Arizona uniform that Gronkowski played. And this was a ranked BYU team, and Mike Stoops' team whooped up on him.
Yeah.
Arizona was up 31-14 in the fourth quarter. Max Hall ran one in late. And Arizona won the game 31-21. When we have Chris Gronkowski on, we always talk about that the touchdown, the 24-yard touchdown that he had.
Yep.
But it was an amazing night in hindsight. Now at the time, it was so cold, Shane. Like and I'm gonna sound like a wuss because everybody that's probably listening to this podcast has been in colder temperatures than I am. I'm guilty as charged. I'm a warm weather guy. I don't want to go see snow. I don't ski.
Did you rush the field?
No, we got the heck out. I mean, it was so cold, Shane. One of my friends I was with did not handle it real well. I remember going to Cheesecake Factory after that. That was the highlight for me. It was like
that's the place to go in Las Vegas, I hear.
Well, of course. Well, we went to the basketball game earlier in the day,
right?
So that was another thing.
They lost to UNLV that earlier in the day.
They did,
yeah.
But that was an all-time Arizona day to be able to do that, and then go to the football game that night, and then to cap it off. I mean, it was such a satisfying win. I'd say one of the more satisfying Arizona bowl games. You put that with the New Mexico Bowl. I think that was 2013 with the comeback. And then obviously this Alamo Bowl that we just saw in 2023. I would say those are probably the two, or it's 2012.
2012, yeah. It was Rich Rod's first year. Yeah. Matt Scott season. Yep.
Yeah. 2012 New Mexico Bowl, 2023 Alamo Bowl, and then 2008 Las Vegas Bowl. In the last 25 years since that 98 Holiday Bowl are the three most satisfying Arizona postseason games that we've had. And so I will never forget that Las Vegas Bowl. And it was broadcast on ESPN. We had Mike Patrick and Todd Blackledge, which was one of the bigger broadcast crews at the time.
It was one of the first bowl games of the season too. So it was kind of a bigger deal too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is my fond memory from 2008.
Yeah. And I'll mention, I'm not going to mention a specific game, but I do fondly remember the men's basketball team's run to the Sweet 16 because the program was in a bit of turmoil at the time. With Lou Dolson abruptly retiring due to health reasons, Russ Pennell thrust into the spotlight as the head coach. They lost some games early on. You might remember the UAB game where Jamel Horn fouls in a tie game and blows that one in Tucson. But they strung some big wins together. Again, the lesson, you schedule tough opponents. They beat Gonzaga and Phoenix. They beat Kansas.
They got a
beat
great
UCLA.
draw in the tournament, though. I mean, they got Cleveland State in the second round.
I'm getting there. But what I'm saying, they were the last team in. They were a 12 seed. And a lot of national pundits were screaming bloody murder because they thought like St. Mary's or what some other mid-major should have been in. And the lesson was, don't feast on cupcakes, because Arizona had more top 50. I remember they had 6 top 50 RPI wins that year, more than all of the other teams combined that they were clamoring to be in. And it's like the lesson, you got to beat good teams. And people were mad about it because it's like, the blue blood Arizona got special treatment, but just look at the RPI, look at their schedule, look at who they beat. And so they were a 12 seed. I don't care. They beat Utah, which was not in the Pac-12 at the time. Then I know they had a favorable draw against Cleveland State, but they got to the Sweet 16, got dismantled by Louisville there. But just the fact that kind of that sort of skeleton crew led by Chase Budinger and Nick Wise and Jordan Hill, that they even got there and then made the run to the Sweet 16 was very cool at a time where there were tough times ahead for Arizona men's basketball, and that was kind of a nice way to end that season. And I was happy to see Russ Pennell do as well as he did, because he's a good guy and he deserved that success.
So the year after, when Russ Pennell took the Grand Canyon job, he came into AZTV, which is where I was working at the time. And I remember I took a picture with him and I just said, "Hey, you did us all an incredible, solid, thank you for your work." And he really took a lot of pride in it. And he really, he was very grateful, that I recognized it as a fan. And I remember just him being a really cool guy. I don't know what happened to him now. I wonder where he is.
He coached in Arkansas for a while. I followed him on Twitter I haven't seen him on post anything for a while, but I know he's his faith is very important to him, and he just seems like a genuine good guy, and everyone who's played for him really seems to respect him a lot.
Yeah, he was last the head coach for Central Arkansas.
That's right.
And then that was a few years ago, and not sure what happened from there. Nonetheless, he did great things in a short time in Tucson. So good memories there. And next week we will have another year where we will share our favorite memories, as we will do all summer here on Wildcat Country. So I want to thank Matt Moreno for joining us, our sponsors, Ice Shaker, and of course the title sponsor of this program, Harrah's Auction Casino. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Good luck to baseball and softball this weekend. And as always, bear down.